One of the most popular film categories, especially amongst the Academy Awards, are biopics, otherwise known as biographical pictures. They're definitely Oscar bait when it comes to the acting department. Several performances within the past 10 years have been won through biopics, such as Daniel Kaluuya's performance as Fred Hampton, as well as Freddie Mercury being portrayed by Rami Malek. They have become very commonplace, and in recent years, that's almost all we see in the almost creative part of the film industry, outside of sequels and remakes. I do think that they're just as big of a problem as sequels and remakes, especially when we're being given cookie-cutter biopics. Today I'll be discussing several different types of modern biopics, including Bohemian Rhapsody, which focuses on Queen, specifically Freddie Mercury, King Richard, which focuses on the father of tennis players Venus and Serena Williams, Spencer, which is a psychological deep dive into Princess Diana, and finally Tick Tick Boom, which is an autobiographical adaptation of a play written by Jonathan Larson, creator of Rent himself. So first off, we have Bohemian Rhapsody, which is a fan favorite by several, but also hated at the same time by others. For me, it's the equivalent of an info dump. Everything within Bohemian Rhapsody I can really take away by reading a Wikipedia article or reading one of those 32-page biographies that you can find in any elementary school library. It's straightforward, and it doesn't really need to be a movie. There's no emotional grasp to it except for maybe perhaps nostalgia and just really being able to see these characters being brought to life. The character being brought to life within Bohemian Rhapsody is Freddie Mercury, and since you're able to see these icons who maybe we haven't seen in a while, because typically biopics are created after their deaths or they're introducing them to a newer generation, it's very neat and almost magical to be able to see these people come to life, especially when those performances are so great. Which I don't think the problem is within the performances of these types of biopics, because they're really exceptional, and it's really cool to see how much research has gone into bringing these people back to us through the silver screen. Of course, the biggest problem lies in just the way that they're made from a technical standpoint. There is no really cohesive story except that it's following the life of a person, and because there's no cohesive story, it doesn't really follow a specific act, except it just builds up to some big event that happened into their life. But there aren't necessarily signs of that coming in from the first act, because the first act is almost singular. I have nothing really new to say about Bohemian Rhapsody. I personally am not a fan of it. I think that its biggest flaw is that it's just a by-the-numbers biopic. It's just giving me everything that I could learn if I were to go to Wikipedia and look up Freddie Mercury, or even just look up Queen. Because of that, I'm not a huge fan of Bohemian Rhapsody. King Richard is very similar to Bohemian Rhapsody, I thought. Mostly it's just following this journey to eventually the success of Venus and Serena Williams. A lot of it I would say about the second half of the movie, we can really it's very much like Bohemian Rhapsody. We can get all that from a Wikipedia page. You do some quick research. We're not taking a deep dive into these characters, really getting to understand them. I really enjoyed the first half of that movie just because it focused on more of an emotional part, and because it was highlighting the family aspect behind it and what it was like before they started to really become successful. I think certain parts of that really transcend into the idea of characterizing these humans and making them almost larger than life. There is that touch of intimacy, as I mentioned, and that family aspect from it, simply because this was produced by the Serena and Venus Williams, so it's almost a love letter to their dad. I think another problem within King Richard and just Bohemian Rhapsody and other biopics in general is that they're trying to tell a lifetime worth of story into 2.5 hours, and there's just so much going on that we simply have to they simply skim over some important aspects within the story because there's just not enough time. And because of the scope of the biopic because they're going over so much within such a short amount of time. A lot of the intimate moments are overlooked, and because you can't linger on anything for too long. We're kind of jumping around everywhere, which it kind of ruined the movie for me. I don't think that this would have been the best way to look at this icon and these important people, King Richard, Venus, and Serena Williams. I think if you narrow the scope down within King Richard, it would have been a lot better and more enjoyable because we are getting these more intimate moments between the Williams sisters and their father. Now, Spencer, I think, is completely different than King Richard and Bohemian Rhapsody. It's not giving us a by-the-numbers biopic. It's not giving us this huge year transcending story. Instead, it's focusing within the week of Christmas in the year that Princess Diana found out that her husband was having an affair. Because the scope of this is so narrow, we're able to have a lot of tender moments with Diana. We're mindlessly roaming at times and just trying to get to learn this character. It's very character driven, which is what I look for in a biopic, which is what I think a biopic should be focusing on, just bringing these characters to us, giving us a sort of insight within these characters. I think that one of the reasons why it manages to do this so well, the movie Spencer, is because it leans into a sort of fictitious aspect of Princess Diana's life, and that a lot of the stuff is happening in her head. It explores the psychological aspect of being part of the royal family and this coming out in the days leading up to Christmas, and how that affected her mental health and all that. And it's not necessarily 100% fact. I walk out of the movie and it's not like, oh yeah, I know everything there is to know about Princess Diana. I can't spew facts left and right about Princess Diana after watching this movie. But I do come out of this movie having a better understanding of the struggles that she faced within the royal family, and not so much just like struggles with the press, but just more like the psychological struggles, not the physical struggles. And that's because we're able to focus on her within just like those few weeks. The psychological cinematography and as well as the score in it makes this one feel more like a movie than it does an info dump. It's very cinematic in nature. Tick, Tick, Boom follows the story of Jonathan Larson as in an important week in his life when he feels that he's on the brink of success. It very much paints the idea of a tormented artist who's just trying to succeed but just is right there and can't seem to. The original source material for it was written by Jonathan Larson, so it definitely gives us that insight into Jonathan Larson's mindset during this time. Many moments of the movie don't seem realistic at all. There's this one diner scene where he kind of like throws down one of the walls in the diner, which obviously that's hyperbolized. And I think that it's in this more metaphorical sense, this movie magic sense that's found within Tick, Tick, Boom, that's allowing us to understand what's going on in Larson's life. How is he feeling? He's feeling trapped in these moments. And I think it's the blending of fiction and reality that is what makes this film so compelling to me, is that you're not necessarily being swarmed with facts. Instead, you're really getting to know this person. It's a chance for us to artificially and superficially connect to this man who has passed, and will even if he was alive, we probably would never meet in our life. Tick, Tick, Boom and Spencer, they remind me a lot of A Hard Day's Night. A Hard Day's Night is a fiction-based and heavily hyperbolized, almost feels like propaganda of sorts, for the band The Beatles. Everything in it is not at all based on real events, but instead inspired by these real events, inspired by how they felt touring and sort of the hysteria around them. we're able to better understand what the Beatles go through in their daily lives as they're so popular, trying to escape, fans and stardom, paparazzi, and really just try and live their life and have their own moments, which the Beatles are so well known, they're so big, like it would be easy to start making a biopic about them and easily start from day one. We don't really need that in a movie. If we wanted to know all of that, we can go read a book or something like that. We want to be able to feel something for these characters, and to be able to feel something for these characters, we're able to get into their headspace by creating this like work of fiction about them and just getting into the psychological aspect of them, really seeing the world through their eyes, which I think A Hard Day's Night should be sort of a blueprint for what biopics should be like.